Tomb Raider is a 1996 action-adventure video game developed by Core Design and published by Eidos Interactive. It was first released on the Sega Saturn, followed shortly by versions of MS-DOS and the PlayStation. Later releases came to Mac OS in 1999, Pocket PC in 2002, N-Gage in 2003, iOS in 2013, and Android in 2015. It is a debut early in the Tomb Raider media franchise. The game follows an archaeologist adventurer, Lara Croft, who is hired by businesswoman Jacqueline Natila to find an artifact called the Scion of Atlantis. Gameplay features Lara navigating levels split into multiple areas and room complexes while fighting enemies and solving puzzles in the progress. The initial concept was created by Toby Gard, who is credited as Lara's creator and worked as lead artist on the project. The project began in 1994 and took 18 months with a budget of £440,000. The character of Lara was based on several influences, including Tank Girl, Indiana Jones, and Hardboiled. The 3D gride-based level design, innovative for its time, was inspired by the structure of Egyptian tombs. The music was composed by Nathan McCree, who took inspiration from English classical music. Originally announced in 1995, the title went on to receive extensive press attention and heavy promotion from Eidos Interactive. Reception of the game was very positive, with praise of its innovative 3D graphics, controls, and gameplay, and it went on to win several industry awards. The game is one of the best-selling video games for the franchise, and 7 million units sold worldwide. And it remained the best-selling title in the Tomb Raider franchise until the release of the 2013 reboot. Lara Croft became a cultural icon, rising to prominence as one of the gaming's most recognizable characters. Following the game's success, numerous sequels were released, beginning with Tomb Raider 2 in 1997. A remake set in the continuity, Tomb Raider Anniversary, was developed by Crystal Dynamics and released in 2007. When it comes to gameplay, Tomb Raider is an action-adventure video game in which the player assumes the role of archaeologist adventurer Lara Croft, who navigates through a series of ancient ruins and tombs in search of ancient artifacts. The game is split into 4 zones: Peru, Greece, Egypt, and the lost continent of Atlantis. The training level set in Lara's home of Lara of Croft Manor can be accessed from the start menu. The game is presented in a third-person perspective. Lara is always visible, and the camera follows the action from focusing on Lara's shoulders by default, but the player can take manual control of the camera and get a better look at an area. The game automatically switches to a different camera view at key points, either to give the player a wider look at a new era or to add a cinematic effect. In the Sega Saturn and PlayStation versions, players save their progress in a level using save crystals, while in the PC versions, the player can save at any point. If Lara is killed, the player must restart from the previous save. The object at the Tomb Raider is to guide Lara through a series of tombs and other locations in search of treasures and artifacts. On the way, she must kill dangerous animals and creatures while collecting objects and solving puzzles. The emphasis lies on exploring, solving puzzles, and navigating Lara's dangerous animals and creatures while collecting objects and solving puzzles. Which I've said already. The emphasis lies on exploring, solving puzzles, and navigating Lara's surroundings to complete each level. Movement in the game is varied and allows to complex interactions with the environment. In addition to surroundings to complete each level, movement in the game is varied and allows complex interactions with the environment. In addition to standard movement using tank controls, Lara can walk, jump over gaps, shimmy along ledges, roll, and swim through bodies of water. Certain button combinations allow Lara to either perform a handstand from a hanging position, or execute a swan dive. Lara has 2 basic stances, one with weapon drawn and one with her hands free. When her weapons are drawn, she ultimately locks onto an enemy nearby targets. Locking onto enemy targets prevents her from performing other actions which require her hands, such as grabbing onto ledges to prevent falling. By default, she carries 2 pistols with infinite ammo. Additional weapons include a shotgun, dual magnums, and the dual Uzis. The general action button is used to perform a wide range of movements, such as picking up items, pulling switches, firing guns, pushing or pulling blocks, and grabbing onto ledges. Items to pick up include ammo, small and large medipacks, keys, and artifacts required to complete a stage. Any item that is collected is held onto Lara's inventory until it is used. Throughout each stage, one or more secrets may be located. Discovering these secrets is optional. and when the player finds one, a tune plays. The locations of these secrets vary in difficulty to reach. The player is usually rewarded with extra items. As far as the plot goes, archaeologist adventurer Laura Croft is approached by a mercenary named Larson, who is working for businesswoman Jacqueline Natla. Natla hires Laura to acquire the Scion, a mysterious artifact buried in the tomb of Palopec, within the mountains of Peru. After recovering the Scion from Quakespec's tomb, Laura is ambushed by Larson, who reveals after his defeat that she is holding merely a piece of an artifact, and Natla has sent rival treasure hunter Pierre Dupont to retrieve the other pieces. Breaking into Natla's offices to find out Pierre's whereabouts, Laura discovers a medieval monk's diary and learns that these pieces are buried alongside former Atlantean ruler Tehukan beneath the ancient monastery, St. Francis Folly in Greece. Navigating the monastery and following several firefights with Pierre, Laura locates the tomb of Tehukan, where she finally kills Pierre and recovers the second piece of the Scion he had taken. From the mural, she learns that Tehukan unsuccessfully tried to resurrect Atlantis after one catastrophe struck the original continent. After combining both pieces of the Scion, Laura is shown a vision that reveals a third and final piece of the Scion was hidden in Egypt. After the third Atlantean ruler, a traitor who used the artifact to create a breed of monsters, was captured and imprisoned by Tehukan and Palopec. Making her way through Egypt to the lost city of Kamun, Laura kills Larson and recovers a third Scion piece. Emerging from the caves, Laura is ambushed by Natla and her three henchmen, who take the Scion. Laura escapes and allows her way aboard Natla's yacht, which takes her to a volcanic island holding an Atlantean pyramid filled with monsters. After dispatching Natla's henchmen and making her way through the pyramid, Laura finds the Scion and sees the rest of the vision. Revealing Natla to be the betrayer, Laura faces Natla, who reveals that she intends to use her army to push forward humanity's evolution, as she believes both Atlantis and current civilization are too soft to withstand disaster. Laura decides to destroy the Scion, and Natla's attempt to stop her sends her into the crevice. After fighting a large legless monster, Laura shoots the Scion, setting off a chain of reaction that begins to destroy the pyramid. Laura kills the winged Natla and escapes into the exploding island. When it comes to development of the game, the initial concept of Tomb Raider was created by Toby Gard, who worked for Core Design, a game development studio based on Derby, England, that had established itself developing titles for home computers and Sega consoles. It was proposed by Gard to company lead Jeremy Heath-Smith during a 1994 brainstorming session for game concept for then upcoming PlayStation console. The entire staff approved, and Heath-Smith gave Gard permission to start the project once he finished work on VC Racers for the Sega CD. The game concept was created before anything else, with the game hooks being his cinematic presentation and being a 3D character-driven experience. The initial team was Gard and Paul Douglas, who worked on design and pre-production for 6 months, before the team expanded to 6 people, including programmers Gavin Rummery and Jason Gosling, the level designers and artists Neil Boyd and Heather Gibson. The team wanted to mix the adventuring style of Ultima Underworld and the 3D characters shown off in Virtua Fighter. The development budget for the game at the time was approximately £440,000. Yes, £440,000. The production atmosphere was fairly informal. Development began in 1994 and lasted 18 months. The team endured excessive overtime and crunch during the last stages. During production, Core Design was sold to Centrigold, which in turn was purchased by Eidos Interactive of May of 1996, who became publisher for the title. When Gard first presented the idea for the game, the concept art featured a male who strongly resembled Indiana Jones. Heath-Smith asked for a change for legal reasons. When Gard created the initial design document, he decided to give the player a choice of genders and created a female adventurer alongside the male character. Once he realized creating and animating 2 playable characters would require double the design work, he decided to slim back down to 1. The female character, originally named Laura Cruz, was his favorite, so he discarded the male character before development work began. After Eidos became the game's publisher, they unsuccessfully lobbied for a selectable male lead. Speaking about his approach to the concept, Guard noted that he deliberately went against publisher trends when designing both the character and the gameplay. Lara went through several changes before the developers settled on the final version, including a name change to Lara Croft, after Eidos executives in America objected to the original name. The inspirations for the character of Lara Croft included the character Tank Girl, the Indiana Jones series, Teller Lead, and the John Woo film Hard Boiled. Laura's noticeably exaggerated physical proportions were a deliberate choice by Guard, as he wanted a coordinated, rather well-created caricatured personification of women who could be an action icon for the younger generation. Laura's movements were hand-animated and coordinated rather than created using motion capture. The reason for this was that the team wanted uniformity in her movement, which was not possible with motion capture technology for the time. For the game's earliest stages, the team wanted the title to involve tombs and pyramids. In the early story draft, Lara would be controlled by a rival group called the Chaos Raiders. During the Greece levels, Lara and Pierre were able to have been less than hostile rivals, helping each other with puzzles in the first level. Larson evolved from an Afrikaans character called Lars Kruger, who shared a similar role to the original plot. The script itself was written by Vicky Arnold, who joined in 1995 and would work later on Tomb Raider titles. Guard and Douglas created the basic story draft alongside the initial game design, and Arnold turned it into a script after joining the project. It was Arnold's job to write the dialogue and create cohesive narrative around the locations selected by the team members. While Lara's character design and Guard's initial concept were present, much of the additional detail was worked out by Arnold. The team kept the project deliberately simple and comparatively modest in scope. The platforming design drew extensively from Prince of Persia, with the doppelganger enemy during the Atlantis section being in the homage of the Shadow Prince from the game. The high number of animal enemies was meant to ground players in the world before the more fantastical elements appeared, in addition to being easier to animate and program in the human enemies. The staff were also uncomfortable with Lara killing that many humans. The initial concept gave combat prominence, but as production began, the focus shifted on platforming and puzzle solving. The plan that made it into the final product was using enemy placement to shift the atmosphere from pure action-adventure to a horror-like tone. The team consistently set on the story in a real astrological locations representing central cultures. Boyd and Gibson immersed themselves in literature and history about each culture, and for the first three areas, respectively, inspired by the Inca Empire, classical Greece, and ancient Egypt. The Greeks levels were put in after land levels in Angkor Wat, Cambodia, were dropped. The Croft Manor training level was built by Guard over a weekend. Its design was based on pictures of Georgian manor houses taken from unspecified reference book. As far as design and platforms go, the title was developed for Sega Saturn, MS-DOS personal computers, PC, and PlayStation. With all three versions of development simultaneously, Gosling led programming for the Saturn version. Douglas described the game code for each title as identical, with an additional layer of specific coding to tailor to the game for each platform. While Sony Europe approved the game early on, making Tomb Raider one of the earliest approved third-party products for the PlayStation, Sony America initially rejected the gamer's concept and asked for better content. Douglas blamed the response and core design submitting Tomb Raider too early in production. In response, the development team made several changes in the game design documentation and produced a version only Sony hardware, which could lead to worldwide approved by Sony. For the Saturn version, Sega negotiated a timed exclusivity deal in Europe, meaning the Saturn version was released in that region ahead of other versions. Core design of Sega made the deal during the last few months of development, so the team had to finish up the Saturn version 6 weeks earlier than they had planned, forcing them to work even longer hours. Following the release of the Saturn version, a number of bugs were discovered that affected all versions of the game. Because of the time exclusivity, the development team fixed those bugs for the PlayStation and PC versions. Two notable surviving bugs in all versions were corner bug which allowed players to scale architecture and jumping repeatedly against a corner, a bug of which caused the game to not recognize the collection of a secret and final level. In 1997, Core Design opened negotiations with Nintendo to release a Nintendo 64 version of the game and started to work on the port in anticipation for negotiations being successful. The planning took place from between 1996 and 1997, with Douglas wanting to redesign the game when Sony finalized a deal to keep subsequent Tomb Raider games exclusive to PlayStation until the year 2000. A third-person 3D action adventure like Tomb Raider was unprecedented at the time. The development team took several months to find ways to make Guard's vision for the game work on the hardware of the time, in particular getting the player character to interact with the freedom environments. Tomb Raider used a custom-built game engine and did many games of that era. The engine was designed and built Douglas to assassinate from Rummery. Rummery created a level editor which followed for seamless creation of levels. According to Rummery, the decision to build the game levels on grid was the key breakthrough of making the game possible. It is its core design contention that prior to the development of Tomb Raider, they were struggling somewhat with 32-bit development. The level editor program was designed so that developers could make rapid adjustments to specific areas with ease. Another noted aspect was the multi-layered levels, as compared to equivalent 3D action adventure games of the time, which were mostly limited to flat floor system with little verticality. The interlinking room design was inspired by Egyptian multicolored tombs, particularly the tomb of Tutankhamun. The grid-based pattern was a necessity due to the D-pad-based tank controls and the Saturn's quad polygon-based rendering technology. Levels were first designed using a wireframe construction, with each area of the stage having only links to other areas of a level and walls. The team then added architecture and gameplay wireframe construction, with each area of the stage having only links to other areas of a level and walls. The team then added architecture and gameplay elements like traps and enemies, then implemented different lightning values. Due to the time and technical limitations, planned outdoor areas had to be cut. The choice of the third-person perspective influenced the team's opinion that the game type was underrepresented when compared to the first-person shooters such as Doom. The third-person view meant multiple elements were difficult to implement, including the character and camera control. The camera had 4 preset angles, which seamlessly switched depending on the character's position and the level of progress. For standard navigation and combat, the camera was fixed on a particular point and oriented around Laura while focusing on the object. Laura's twin pistol setup was a place from early prototypes. The aiming system was designed so that way each gun arm had an aiming axis, which shared a sweet spot where both guns fired at the same target. For underwater environments, the effects were created using Gouraud shading to create real-time ripple and lighting effects. When it comes to the audio, the music for Tomb Raider was composed by Nathan McCree, who at the time was in-house composer for core design. The main inspiration behind the core for McCree was English classical music. The approach was directly influenced by his conversations with Guard about Laura's character. Based on this, he kept the main theme simple and melodic. The main theme used a four-note motif, which continues to appear through the series. The piece where the depths unfold, used when Laura is swimming underwater, was a choral work. It was a choral work. They did not have the space or budget for live music recording, which was challenging for McCree as he needed to create a whole thing using synthesizers. To make the chore sound realistic, he inserted recordings of himself breathing at the right points to see if it sounded like an actual choir. For each track, McCree got a basic description of which the music would be used, then left to create it. There was no time for rewrites, so each track was included in the game as first composed. Unlike most other games at the time, there was not a musical track playing consistently throughout the game. Instead, limited musical cues would play only during specially selected moments to produce a dramatic effect. For the majority of the game, the only audio heard is action-based effects, atmosphere sounds, and Laura's own grunts and sighs, of which were enhanced because they did not have to compete with the music. According to McCree, the game was scored this way because he was allotted very little time for the job, forcing him to quickly write pieces without any thought to where they would go in the game. When the soundtrack was finally applied, The developers found that the tunes worked best when applied to specific places. The symphonic sounds were created using Roland Corporation's Orchestral Expansion Board for their JV series keyboards. English voice actress Shelley Blond provided her voice of Laura. She was given the job after an agent called and had her record some audition lines onto tape. She felt under a lot of pressure at the time, as the core design spent 3 months searching for the right voice. She recalled, "I was asked to perform her voice in a very plain, non-emotive manner and in a female Bond type of way. I would have added more inflection, tone, and emotion to my voice, but they wanted to keep it how it felt and it should have sounded, which was quite right. My job was to bring their character to life." According to Blonde, she spent 4 to 5 hours recording her voice for Laura, including the grunts, cries, and other effort and death sounds. A different account attributes these sounds to Gibson, Core Design's PR manager, Susie Hamilton, and sound designer Martin Iverson, whose voice pitch was made higher. Blonde would not return for any of the subsequent entries. In a 2011 interview, Blonde stated that her departure was due to disagreeing with some things within Core Design and Eidos. But 5 years later, she said that she was asked to reprise her role but had to decline due to other commitments. She gave permission for her effort voice work to be reused, while characters' dialogue would be voiced by Judith Gibbons. When it comes to release in different versions, Tomb Raider was first confirmed in 1995, although details were kept scarce by the developers. There was little attention from the press until a demo was run at the 1996 Electronic Entertainment Expo, causing the press and public to pay more attention. There was a huge amount of publicity, much of which did not involve Core Design team at all, which prompted mixed feelings. While the scale of the game's eventual popularity was not in the team's minds, its strong reception at gaming events hinted that they would be a success. To help promote the game, Eidos hired models to portray Lara Croft at trade events. They first hired Natalie Cook, but apparently due to their insuitability with Eidos cross-media platforms for the character, she was replaced with Rana Mitra in 1997. Mitra served as Laura's model until 1998. The game was first released for Saturn in Europe on the 25th of October 1996. In North America, the Saturn, PlayStation, MS-DOS versions were released simultaneously on 14th of November. In Europe, the PlayStation MS-DOS versions were released on the 22nd of November. Future PC patches allowed the game to work on Windows 95. The PC version was released on Steam on the 29th of November in 2012. The PlayStation and Saturn versions were also published in Japan in 1997 by Victor Interactive Software under the name Tomb Raiders. The Sega version was released on the 14th of January, while the PlayStation version came on the 14th of February. The PlayStation version was re-released for the PlayStation Network in North America in August of 2009, and in Europe in 2010. In August of 2010, actually. An attempt was made by Realtek VR to remaster the first 3 Tomb Raider titles for Windows, but due to not having asked permission from the then franchise owner Square Enix first, the project was cancelled. In 1997, 4 new levels were released in the expansion pack for the Windows version known under the title Tomb Raider: Unfinished Business. The expansion pack also came with promotional materials for the game's sequel Tomb Raider 2. In 1998, the levels were made available as downgradable content for the Windows release, and the budget version was released on the 20th of March, containing both original game and additional levels under the title Content of the Windows release, and a budget version of the release on 20th of March containing both the original game and the additional levels under the title Tomb Raider Gold. Production of these new levels was led by Phil Campbell, a newcomer who transferred the core design of another project was cancelled. The 2 new areas were dubbed Unfinished Business and set within the ruins of the Atlantic Pyramid, and Shadows of the Cat, which was cancelled. This saw Laura in the Temple of Egypt, dedicated to the goddess Bastet. Unfinished Business was intended as an alternate, more difficult finale to the game, featuring more mutant enemies and focus on complex platforming. The concept for Shadow the Cat was born from a cat statue used in the Commune level, with the levels being themed after a cat's 9 lives. And due to licensing issues, several later re-releases excluded the gold content. The game was released on Mac OS on the 16th of March in 1999 and was ported to the platform by Aspyr and based on Tomb Raider Gold. A port to the Pocket PC was published by Indango in July of 2002 and was released in N-Gage of October of 2003. Both ports were developed by Idealworks 3D. Tomb Raider was ported to iOS devices developed and published by Square Enix, and the port was released on 17th of December in 2013 and includes an additional levels of gold release. This version was released on Android devices on April 2015. Nude Raider, an infamous part of Tomb Raider's history, is a fan-made software patch dubbed Noob Raider. This patch, when added to existing PC copy of Tomb Raider game, caused Laura to appear naked. In 1999, Core Design considered taking legal action against websites and hosted nude pictures of Lara Croft, stating that we have a large number of young fans and we don't want them stumbling across pictures when they do a general search for Tomb Raider. IDOS sent a cease and desist letters to the owners of the nuderaider.com URL and hosted the patch before copyright of Tomb Raider sites depicting nude images of Lara Croft have been sent to cease and desist notices and shut down. And IDOS Interactive was awarded the rights to the Nude Raider domain theme. A rumor stated that the game was a cheat code for Laura's nudity. Management did suggest adding it to developers, but they refused. As a response to the controversy, Core Design included a secret code in the sequel, allegedly a similar nude code. It in fact blows Laura up. Upon its release in 1996, the game was widely praised by video game magazines for its variety and depth of control, revolutionary graphics and intriguing environments, and the use of occasional combat to maintain an atmosphere of tension. Ryan McDonald of GameSpot described the game as having the puzzle solving from Resident Evil, the gory action of Loaded, and the ability to have 360-degree fandom to the gameplay. The game tied with the Saturn version of Street Fighter Alpha 2 for Electronic Gaming Monthly's Game of the Month, with their review saying that it stood out from other titles and was the PlayStation's best release at the time. Next Generation called it a thought-provoking, riveting action-adventure easily on par with intensity of any of Hollywood's finest efforts, calling it a landmark title and to the potential trend setter for that console generation. Some critics rated the PlayStation version better than the Saturn version. McDonald wrote that its graphics were sharper and the GamePro scored it half a point higher than the Saturn version in every category, despite not noting the former's solid showing. However, the Next Generation and it would not bother the review of PlayStation version because the differences between it and the Saturn version were negligible. Similarly, Electronic Gaming Monthly only reviewed the PlayStation version and stated that the feature on the game and that both versions were playable and enjoyable while also having identical graphics. A retrospective analysis of the game by Digital Foundry referred to Saturn as the version of the least enjoyable versions due to the lower frame rate and poorer audio compared to other versions. Next Generation reviewed the PC version for Tomb Raider Gold, rated it 3 stars out of 5, and wrote that it was a suitable purchase for series newcomers, with old players being more likely to download the levels from the game website. Tomb Raider was a Computer Game Strategy Plus in 1996 overall Game of the Year and won the magazine's award for the best 3D action game as well. It was a finalist of CNET Game Center's 1996 Best Action Game Award and went to Quake. Electronic Gaming Monthly named Tomb Raider a runner-up for both PlayStation Game of the Year, behind Tekken 2, and Saturn Game of the Year, behind Dragon Force, commenting that both versions had been designed to take optimum advantage of the console's capabilities and named it runner-up for both Action Game of the Year behind the Die Hard trilogy and Adventure Game of the Year behind Super Mario 64, as well as Game of the Year again behind Super Mario 64. It won Best Animation in 1996 Spotlight Awards. Less than a year after its release, Electronic Gaming Monthly ranked the PlayStation version of Tomb Raider the 54th best console game of all time, particularly citing the vast and compelling areas to explore. In 1998, PC Gamer declared it the 47th best computer game released, and editions called it tremendous fun play and legitimate piece of modern gaming history. In 2001, Game Informer ranked it the 86th best game ever made. They praised it for Laura's appeals in gamers and non-gamers alike. As far as sales and accolades go, at release, Tomb Raider topped the British charts record 3 times. and contributed substantially to the success for the PlayStation. In the previous year, Eidos Interactive had recorded nearly 2.6 million pre-tax loss. The success of the game turned its loss into a $14.5 million profit in a year. It has one of the top-selling games of the PlayStation console and was one of the best to be released in the PlayStation's Platinum series, and its success made Tomb Raider 2 the most anticipated game of 1997. By 1997, 2.5 million units had been sold worldwide. In August of 1998, the game's computer division received the Platinum Sales Award from the Verband der Unabhängige Software Deutschland, VUD, which is PlayStation release took gold. These prizes indicate sales of 200,000 and then 100,000 units respectively across Germany, Austria, and Switzerland during the first 3 months of 1997. Tomb Raider was the 9th best-selling console game in the United States, with sales of 143,000 units. This made it the country's highest-selling PlayStation title for the period. Tomb Raider sold over 700 million copies worldwide. Tomb Raider, along with its successor, Tomb Raider 2, were the 2 best-selling games of the franchise prior to the 2013 record. In 1999, Next Generation listed Tomb Raider as number 22 of its top 50 games of all time, commenting that the level design and the art direction enabled a real feeling of exploration and accomplishment in 2001. GameSpot listed Tomb Raider as its 15th most influential games of all time, saying that it served as a template for many 3D action games that would follow and helped drive the market for 3D accelerator cards for PCs. In 2004, the official UK PlayStation magazine chose Tomb Raider as the 4th best game of all time. It won a multitude of Game of the Year awards from leading industry publications. In 1998, Tomb Raider won the Origins Award for Best Action Computer Game of 1997. In 1999, Guard and Paul Douglas won the Berners-Lee Interactive BAFTA Award for Best Contribution to the Industry for their work creating the franchise. In 2018, the Strong National Museum of Play inducted Tomb Raider to its Wiki Video Game Hall of Fame. When it comes to legacy, the sequel to the game, Tomb Raider 2, was also in the concept stage as production for Tomb Raider was wrapping up. Under pressure from Eidos Interactive, Core Design would develop a new Tomb Raider annually between 1997 and 2000, putting considerable strain on the team. Their struggles culminated in the troubled development of Tomb Raider: The Angel of Darkness for PlayStation 2. Releasing to poor critical reception and lackluster sales, Eidos Interactive transferred the franchise to another development studio they owned, Crystal Dynamics, who would reboot the series in 2006 with Tomb Raider Legend. Following the release of Tomb Raider, Lara Croft herself became a gaming icon, seeing unprecedented media across the promotion. These included commercials for cars and foodstuffs, an appearance on the cover of The Face, and requests for sponsorship from outside companies. The level of sophistication Tomb Raider reached in combining state-of-the-art graphics and atmosphere soundtrack and a cinematic approach to the gameplay was at time unprecedented. While Guard enjoyed working on core design, he wished to have greater creative control and disliked the Eidos treatment of Lara Croft in promotional material, which focused on her sexuality and the expense of her in-game characterization. Guard and Douglas left core design in 1997 to found their own studio. Confounding factor, this prompted mixed feelings for remaining core design staff, who were already at work on the next title in the series. Speaking in 2004, Guard said that he would have liked to produce a sequel, but noted that Lara had changed from his original concept for her, leaving him unsure of how he would handle her. Guard would eventually return to the franchise with Tomb Raider Legend. After the release of Legend, Crystal Dynamics created a remake of Tomb Raider, using the Legend engine and continuity. Guard acted as one of the story designers, fleshing out both main narrative and Lara's characterization. The remake was co-developed by Crystal Dynamics and Buzz Monkey Software, titled Tomb Raider Anniversary. The game released worldwide in 2007 for PlayStation 2, Windows, and PlayStation Portable, Xbox 360, and Wii. Fan interest in the game was continued since its original release in 2016. Developer Timur X Proger Gangief began work on OpenLara, an open source port of the original Tomb Raider engine. The further development of this project enabled Tomb Raider to be ported to many modern and legacy systems, such as the 3DO Interactive Multiplayer and the Xbox iPhone, and the Nintendo DS in January of 2022. A version of the Game Boy Advance was released, which attracted attention from several media sources. Yeah, so when it comes to Tomb Raider 1, I have to say that back in the day, even though I didn't play much of it, I will have to say that Tomb Raider was everywhere, and a lot of the young men of my era, so to speak, right, when we were kids, you know, in our teen eras, we were definitely fond of Laura because she was a quote unquote, you know, hot female, and they're definitely not wrong when they said that they basically were focused on her sexuality as opposed to the character. That was definitely a thing, and we ate it all up. We basically ate it all up, and at the time, you know, this article was a perfect example also of how what teams go through in order to create a game that they basically like once the game becomes successful, it's like the team is just pushed for sequel after sequel after sequel, and crunch time just seems to eat the team up. And it's like, you know, you gotta remember that the people that are creating all these things are people, you know. So but unfortunately, when it comes to game development, this stuff can be very stressful, and this was back in the day when teams were not as big as they are today. Now granted, that doesn't mean that things are less stressful. If anything, I mean, I would love to talk to game developers myself and ask them, you know, I mean, it's still stressful. I mean, at this point, I remember seeing a recent interview with IGN that Ed Boon did for Mortal Kombat 12. Basically, he said that he was asked, "What is your favorite? What's your favorite part of developing the game? Like, which is your favorite stage of developing a game?" And Ed Boon said, "Finishing. You just get your life back." So basically, at this point, and Ed basically oversees everything, right? So even though he mentioned that he doesn't really do code anymore because he was originally a programmer, and I think he stopped like 15 years ago, give or take, or something like that. Like, he still, you know, he still does a lot of things, and what he does is he basically oversees a lot of the things that they do. Basically similar to the Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance behind the scenes footage that actually came with the game if you were to unlock it, or you can find it on YouTube. I thought it was really fascinating, and that was like one of the first, if not the first, making of video game type of video that I've ever seen. And I thought it was really, really fascinating, and you got to see a little taste of what goes on. And one thing that I definitely see is that when it comes, especially when it comes close to release time, like those teams, like I'm sure there are times where team members don't even go home. Like they'll stay at work, they'll eat at their desk, they'll just crunch time and time again, and they're just not stopping until they're completely finished. You know, they don't even have to go home. And the thing is, a lot of team members coincide with each other. So it's like if one certain team member that does one specific job doesn't go home, that means the other guy doesn't get to go home either, because their jobs kind of coincide and they kind of have to work together or something like that. So yeah, game development in and of itself is something that I truly respect, because all these devs work ridiculous amount of hours to get shit done, especially on time that they're pressured from the developer. All I know is that if I own my own thing, it's like I would definitely give them the time that they needed. I mean, sure, I'm sure there would have to be crunch time once they established that they would be ready at a certain time. But with that being said, it's like, you know, you gotta keep things in the balance, you know, because the happier your team is, the better of a product they will create for you at the end of the day. Because as you heard in this article here, a lot of their sequels basically just weren't as good simply because there was just way too much pressure, which interfered with the quality of the game, more or less. So there you go. And that makes quite a big difference. So I think patience is a virtue. But like I said, we don't live in a perfect world, and that's not how things go, unfortunately. But yeah, this was Tomb Raider of 1996, Retrospective, the video game. Let me know, what kind of impact did this game have on you? I'm 38 years old, and if you're around my age, did the character appeal to you quite a bit because she was a quote-unquote, you know, attractive female or whatnot, and with the polygons and the stuff that they did with her figure and stuff like that? And did you like the movie, and did you think that Angelina Jolie was a good casting choice for Laura for the movies? Let me know down in the comment section. I hope you enjoyed this retrospective as I did making it, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.